Um, what week is this? What week is it?
Five.
So the end of week 5.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay, you're more than halfway there. Yeah. It is strange because not only is time just like kind of weird right now anyway, but I feel like cohorts, like, you know, that I've been through a few cohorts. It's like this every time. It's like, oh my gosh, like we're just getting started. Oh my gosh, we're done. What are we talking about? So like you're already over the hump. Like you're over halfway there. So yeah, you just have a couple weeks left, and then you'll be talking about your last week. You know. So anyway, excited to see what y'all have the demo today. As we talked about in the channel, Lauren's going to be kind of stepping in for me for the last few weeks as I'm ramping up the kind of TCL pilot group. It's a bit much to try and be across 2 groups at the same time. So I really appreciate Lauren, you stepping in for me. Lauren's great. I mean, you'll talk to her for 2 seconds. You'll love her. So, and hi, Miles.
Hello.
There she is. All right. Cool. So if y'all are ready to demo, I don't know which group wants to go first, but I think there's stuff to demo on from both teams, right? So rock, paper, scissors.
Doesn't matter to me. If Miles, are you ready to get our demo on? I'll take
Give me a second. I gotta switch my screens over. Almost ready. No clickies to make. All right.
All right, cool. The two windows are so exactly half of the screen. It's really impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. It's like my favorite moment of the day when I put them together and they take up exactly half of the screen.
Right.
I'm happy at that moment. And then later on I gotta. Alrighty. This is our component. This is our part of the app that we worked on this week. Elise, take it away.
All right, so our AC was to create a search component or aspect to the app and allow for the user to type in an item and be able to find it and single out that item on the list.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. That's really exciting because it was kind of broken for a while, like a long while. But so what we did with the code is originally we had set up a filter component, and we had the majority of the functionality within the filter component, like the handle change and all that. But the issue we were running into was we weren't receiving the props from the parent component properly. And so Miles and Lauren kind of did some work, and now the majority of the inner workings of the component are held on the shopping component, which I would classify as the parent component, and passing that down to the child. That's something that I feel more comfortable about now after this week. So yeah, kind of going through the code. Let's see where to start. So there are 2 event handlers. I actually don't know if I would consider the handle clear an event handler. It's more like a method that's used. And then
I think that one is the use state part, right? The quick button. No, my bad.
Oh no, you don't have to apologize for anything.
Just kidding.
We are learning together.
Okay, yeah. Because I was with Lauren when she did all this, and it was like watching magic in front of my eyes. I was shooketh.
So on line 7, I know that we created a hook that would allow the state to be an empty string originally. And then the second hook would be to actually access the props. And then from there, the use effect would be setting, actually creating the function that has the props. I think that's what that's doing. I'm not entirely sure about the use effect. But yeah. Are there any questions, concerns?
I'm curious. I couldn't figure out what line 21 does. So it looks like it's a Boolean, looks like a question to me. And I couldn't understand how that cleared out the list. Like the set filter string kind of made sense, but the other statement didn't, to me.
Line 21. All I remember is that it has to do with the button, like the clearing the button, like the clear button, so that we could actually, clear this at the end. Like if you type in ketchup, could be wrong, and my memory could be faulty at this point, but it should let us do that. I could be wrong.
But Scott, I think you're asking about just kind of the syntax of it. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like what is that doing? So it looks like it's a question. I can't see if it's doing, well, I mean, the set filtered list, I can see what that's doing. It's sort of sending it back to whatever came in the first place. The props.list.length is greater than 0. I'm not sure, I don't understand what that is doing there.
It's like a Boolean check. So it's checking first, like it's saying if the props.list.length is greater than 0. If that's true, then do the next thing. It's kind of it's a different way of, if you wanted to do a ternary, like if this is true, do that, otherwise do this other thing. But we didn't really have an otherwise, so you can just check the first part.
Yeah, you could also just put that like if props.list.length is greater than 0, and then in square brackets have it do the function. It would be the same thing. It's just the syntax of like JavaScript allows you to kind of have that statement. If the first part of the statement evaluates to false, it just doesn't continue down the line. But if it does, then it has that and then it does the second half.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So nice. Yeah, that's great. Seems to work well. Were there any? I was trying to think of any edge cases here that we should test, but I think it's.
I checked capitalization. It worked with that.
Oh, nice. That's a good one.
That was a common one, but I couldn't find any other like edge cases to think or to actually implement. But definitely the one that stood out was to lowercase. So.
And the only other thing I could think of is if your list had like 1,000 items in it, how would it perform? But that's not. I mean, it's hard to set it up that way, and B, not likely to happen for most users. So
it's like cool. A shopping list for an army, or like
right. Somebody who makes everything from scratch.
Coronavirus shopping list.
Oh my God, we've been buying so many more groceries at one time than we ever have. Anyway.
I learned that the hard way because I had to buy everything. Like what people don't know is that this whole shelter in place started with me having nothing. Like I didn't have a fridge. I didn't have I literally was sleeping on a floor in a room and all I had was my desk. So I had to buy everything through the pandemic. Like all my food, all my dishes, everything all the furniture. Whew, I can tell y'all, shopping online is a whole shebang-a-bang in the coronavirus times.
Yeah, for sure. All right, good job. Excellent. Looks like it works. I like it's a nice, elegant solution.
I'm gonna take my screen back.
Yep. It's good stuff. All right, Sarah's out. So Scott, you want a demo for the two of you?
I will. One thing I forgot to do was pull up my AC just to show it. Oh, it's already merged, so I don't have it.
You could go to the issues maybe and show
oh,
it
right.
in the issue.
Thank you.
Sure.
Resources. All right, so what we're trying to do is, so we had a person being able to add an item to their shopping list, and we wanted to, they could purchase it, but we want to make an estimate of the number of days until the next purchase based on their history of purchases. And so here is a shopping list, and we left it at doing 2 decimal places, I think. See how to demo this. So I just added this. This one has 0 purchases. So when you add an item, it automatically has 0 purchases. Maybe that's obvious. And so when you click purchase, the number of purchases goes up to 1. So it's calculating based on that. And so with 1 purchase, the number of days doesn't change because we're assuming that you know that from the time you purchase it, you want 14 days. Making those assumptions is kind of a hard part for me. And then we go to my clock, and I'm going to purchase this again in 8 days. Refresh. And so that was dog foods. I'm going to purchase that again 8 days later, and it does an average through Andrew's estimates function. And then you can see, oh, right, that makes sense. Number of purchases is 2, next purchase is in 12 days. And yeah, that's doing that.
It's time to install Java, of course. Like, thanks.
Yeah. Constant. All right, so looking at the code. So the hard part for me was some of the assumptions. For some reason, I couldn't wrap my mind around the assumptions. So eventually I just went with, I'm assuming that the first time you click that button is the first time you bought it, and that I'm not going to second guess you and try and figure out, like, if you added the item on the 1st and bought it on the 8th, I'm not going to try and figure out that time delay. I'm just going to figure it's the first time you bought it, so go with your first estimate. So that was an assumption I made. And then, and that also fixed the fact that it wasn't working with a single purchase. That was another reason to do that. And yeah, we used the get difference, just added the 24 hours to it to get the days rather than the hours. The state starts off, number of purchases 0. Yeah, we want to change a few lines really.
It's a nice way to encapsulate those date utilities, because like put them in a function kind of together to make it easier for future people to come and find those.
Yeah, it's really nice.
We parse it to fixed. I didn't know how that would affect the sorting later. I might have stopped there. The sorting is more just database, but save last purchase. Yeah, pretty simple. I think that only shows like 5 or 6 lines of code. Is there anything anybody wants to see or ask questions about?
Elise or Miles, does that all make sense? Did you follow kind of how they put it together?
I was just going to ask, what was the most challenging aspect for you?
I was getting bogged down in, like I say, trying to figure out the assumptions about what it meant when somebody was pressing a button, especially that first time. For some reason, it was hard for me to wrap my mind around that until I was just like, I'm not going to second guess anything. I'm just going to assume that you know what you're doing and that you're going to run it 14 days before somebody purchases it. I also had a hard time with rabbit holes, I think. I kept getting bogged down in like trying to really understand all the math here, which I eventually did through like working out problem after problem. But it really came down to Sarah stopping me and saying, you don't need to understand what it does, just use it.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a black box. I mean, it took me a couple of iterations to even get to like this algorithm that I mean, it's a weighted average, which there are a lot of ways to calculate that, but kind of like had to kind of tune it in a little bit to get it to not overreact to any one purchase and all that kind of stuff. But.
Was there a reason that you left it working or left it without solving for a single purchase?
Yeah, the reason is that when I built the app for myself, I made the assumption that you were adding things, you were like at the store buying something and you would add it to your list then, like I bought this thing, not like I'm going to buy it in the future. And so everything had a purchase date as soon as it was added to the list. So like for me, I didn't run into this bug, you know what I mean? Like it just, I always had a purchase to work with, so. Cool.
I think this is one of the harder ones. Like this is one of the harder issues, I think, of the whole shebang. Good job.
I have just one question because I played with this when I was trying to do the pull request thing that I never actually finished. To me, like the number, like the way this is set up when you're going into the app, like there we go. Thank you. So it says like frog, and then it says next purchase, last purchase on. The date is a little bit difficult to understand. Like for me it was, and I did like the whole playing with the thing and setting the timer and like changing the dates and everything. And I got that it worked, but is there a way to maybe clean that up a little bit? Because I feel like you really only need so much of this. Like you only really need until the day. I don't know what the I don't know what that part is, but it makes it look a little cluttered.
100%. This is actually a question I had for our mentors in that this stuff, other than the name of the item, this stuff is only here so that we can see what's going on without having a bunch of stuff open. And one of the questions I had, but in like, so I totally see Miles' point, like, yeah, it's ugly. When you're building and you're not at the point where an actual user is going to be using it yet, like, would you still want to at every single iteration have it user focused, or is there a point where up until which, it's like, it can just be like, yeah, we just need to see this stuff so we can just like see it real quick.
That's a good question. Looks like Jason might have a thought about that.
Yeah, I think there's two schools of thought, right? One is until you've quote unquote released it in full to production, you can have it in a state that allows the devs to have all the information available all at once. And then the other side is, especially in a more agile leaning or focused practice, is anything that gets shipped, whether it goes out to the production.com but is considered shipped, should have that user focus in mind, right? So you would then consider, okay, for something like the dates, if we know that for the end user it'll have a prettier formatting, right? Or a shortened formatting or whatever, then it would be, well, how can we deploy that so that always shows up that way for production, right? We haven't really touched on the UI tickets as much yet, right? In terms of formatting times and other things. So I think it's fine where we are now. But even in that kind of state, I think it's helpful sometimes just to talk amongst the team and say, hey, like what information is actually helpful for us to know that this ticket worked, even when we see it in the development version of the app. and then how does that inform how we ship it to our users?
Mhm.
So like for something like where you see the time zone information here, right? Because that's what the weird T and the Z's are with the native JavaScript data object, is it's telling you that it's been rendered in a specific time zone. And then it can like play with it. That's a specific ISO format, which I think it's 8601, and I don't know why I remember that off the top of my head. But somebody please,
I
think you're right.
more fun
I
to
think
remember.
that's what I remember too.
Living up to your name, I see.
Oh yeah, that's right, Time Lord.
Time
Oh, yeah,
Lord.
I've got to share that picture. But yeah, I think that's kind of how we've balanced it in my experience on a lot of different teams. Lauren, Andrew, have y'all had other experiences?
Yeah, for me, like I tend to gravitate toward making things look nice because I'm better at that. You know what I mean? So like to me, I'll gravitate toward those things. But it totally depends. But you know, in the defense of what we see on the screen, like there are issues coming up over the next few weeks that make things look nice. So you know, for you right now, I would say whatever works for the team is great, and then it'll look nicer down the road too.
I mean, I'm going to say that since it's causing confusion to Miles, and now that I understand this React components better, I'm just going to say I'm going to stick with this view and make this simpler to look at. So. Yeah,
I mean, you know, by the time you ship this to end users, you would want it to be elegant and easy to understand, all that stuff. And we're gonna, you know, I'm not sure if it's this week or next week, but there's an issue to add a item details screen where you'll get to surface, you know, the number of days of the next purchase and the last purchase date, the number of purchases, all that data. There'll be a home for that soon. I would still never show a user this date format, but you know, it's fine as just a way for you to kind of have an understanding of like, what day am I talking about here, you know? So yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah, really good question too. Cool. All right, nice job, everybody. So it looks like the PR for at least for you and Miles it's up. It's like it's got the reviewers assigned to it, but is it ready to be reviewed?
Oh no, I still need to finish it with the screenshots and stuff. My bad. Okay. I was trying to get lunch and that turned into a whole shebang.
Well, you know, gotta eat, so it's fine. So yeah, once you have that kind of tidied up, you know, ping people, we'll get that merged as soon as we can. But all the work looks great. Good job, everybody. All right, I'm gonna spend about 15 minutes presenting on accessibility. So it's an odd number week, so it's a learning module week. I'm gonna share a portion of my screen. So that portion is this portion. Well, wait, is it this portion? No, it's gonna be, grab the corner. It's gonna be this portion of the screen. All right. I have a very big screen, so I'm trying to tone it down, like not share the whole thing. Anyway, all right, so we're gonna talk about accessibility. How familiar are you all with that? Is that a concept that you've encountered already at some point or have done any reading about or anything?
I feel like that Women of React event that you posted in the channel kind of brought a lot of things to light that I wasn't even thinking about in terms of accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely something that needs to be talked about more, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree.
And to me, like accessibility is actually a huge reason why I got into tech. I started off as everybody knows, I started off as a circus performer, but the thing that actually made me want to join tech was an event I went to called Tech Inclusion. And it focuses on getting people of color, getting people with different disabilities, like what can we do for accessibility? So I volunteered with this group for, it's been almost 5 years now.
Wow.
So it is a huge passion of mine. Like, I think it's something that people don't really understand. I'm also fluent in sign language, so
Oh,
accessibility
cool.
has always been like a huge thing to me. Even as a kid, I just think there's so much that we don't understand, that we don't take into mind when we design these things, and we don't. And I think it does also come into play, like when you see a user that has a different disability, whether it be like they can't speak, so they can't use a voice thing, or they can't type, so they have to use like different tools to type, or just text to talk, like things like that. It is a huge, huge, huge part of like my life. I'm also autistic, so I do use a lot of disability like help. So it's always been something I'm super passionate about, and I'm always glad when people talk about it.
Nice. And Scott, is it something that you all covered in your boot camp?
Pretty minimally. I mean, we were made aware of the issue, especially the legal issue. And then I've encountered ARIA, not because I've used it, but because of an app that I'm building, where I'm building a bot to submit forms to the Oregon bar, legal Oregon court system. And their site is built on Angular and has all kinds of ARIA tags in it that I'm having to use to figure out like when an item or when an element is available to use.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, that's great. I mean, it sounds like you all are already somewhat familiar, at least, and definitely passionate about it. I just want to get this out of the way. When you see it's actually 11Y. It's not ALLY. So it's not ally. It's A11Y. That's because there are 11 characters between the A and the Y in the word accessibility. So that's where that hashtag comes from. So, so it's A11Y. Yeah, right.
That's why that Slack group name is
Yep. That's it.
I appreciate that.
You'll also see localization, internationalization. Like internationalization is I18L or I18N, because there's 18 characters between the I and the N and internationalization. So it's a pattern you'll see in some of the places.
I never knew that about that.
Right?
As much as I know, I just thought that the A11Y thing was super cute. Like, oh, that's super cool. They found a nice way to put it.
It was like ally for LeetCode.
Right. Exactly. Anyway, so just sort of the formal definition. So web accessibility is inclusive practice of ensuring there are no barriers to prevent interaction with access to websites on the World Wide Web, such an antiquated way to say that, by people with physical disabilities, situational disabilities, and socioeconomic restrictions on bandwidth and speed. So physical disabilities is kind of what we're talking about. You know, if you, you're blind, or you have motor impairments, or you have to use like a different type of keyboard or something. That's what we usually think of as these kind of like permanent disabilities. But there are also situational disabilities, like you broke your arm or something, right? So now you can't use your dominant hand. Socioeconomic restrictions, it's like it really is an equity issue too, like kind of an access, literally an access issue for people that have access to tools they need to kind of be fully participating in society at this point. When sites are correctly designed, developed, and edited, users generally have equal access to information and functionality. So that's the goal, is everybody can get to the same information and have the same opportunity to participate in kind of online life. So the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C, they have a working group dedicated to web accessibility. They publish standards about this stuff. The legal sort of regime over this in the United States is Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. That requires government agencies to make websites accessible to people with disabilities. But it's also started to, for-profit companies are actually finding that they are being held to that as well. So we talked a little bit about, people with disabilities accessing websites using assistive technologies. That's sort of the blanket term for, screen readers or, speech input, these kind of like different kinds of keyboards, braille displays, all this stuff. So, screen readers is the thing that gets talked about the most. And the that's not terrible, because it's better to do something than to do nothing. And if you make your stuff accessible for a screen reader, it's going to make it better for everybody. It's not necessarily going to be perfect for those other modes of access, but it means that you can get to everything with a keyboard. It means that stuff is structured in a way that makes sense. All the stuff that's going to also help these other modes of access. So screen magnifier is just blowing up part of the screen to be bigger. Speech input, so be able to talk to your computer. There are programmers who do their programming by talking to their computer, and it blows my mind. I don't know how they do it. Like, curly brace, semicolon, all that stuff, like it just seemed like it'd be really tedious, but I think they come up with a bunch of shortcuts. Anyway, I digress. Assistive keyboard. So this is all the way down to, there are users that use their chin to move a joystick around that moves a cursor on the screen, and they interact with stuff that way. So the next time, somebody tells you to build this like fancy interactive widget, like take that person into account. And then Braille displays, it's like amazing little machines where a blind person can rest their hand on this machine, and Braille actually gets made in real time that they can then read and kind of read the screen that way. So super cool. On Windows, NVDA and JAWS are the two kind of major screen readers. NVDA is actually free. JAWS is quite expensive, but they both actually have a similar model for how they interpret a page. VoiceOver is built into Macs and has a slightly different model of how it interprets pages. So, a lot of developers use Macs, and so VoiceOver gets talked about a lot. It's like, turn VoiceOver on, try to interact with your page. I'll talk a little bit later about why that's not the only way that you need to kind of do this, but there is kind of a problem with it doesn't really help the Windows users as much as you might think it does, because they do interpret the page in different ways. Like they group things together in different ways and stuff. So it's helpful, but it's not quite sufficient by itself. But anyway, that's a little bit about the what. So why do we do this? I mean, it's the right thing to do, right? To me, it's a social justice issue that we make the web, and it's sort of what the web is founded on too, like make information accessible to as many people as possible. That's why, it's actually like the whole thing with like React, like you kind of ship a user a blank page and then React fills it all in. Like a few years ago, I would have been like dead set against that, because it's like, there are user agents that's will be able to render that stuff, but those problems are going away. Like the screen readers are able to actually work with that better anyway. But the principle being just that we want to, with as many people as possible, to access as much of the information that's available on the web as possible, right? Like it really is the right thing to do. So I talked about how you could be legally obligated to make your website accessible. So Domino's Pizza found out about this recently, where they actually went to court to fight having to make their website fully accessible. Somebody calculated that it probably would have cost them about $20,000 to make their website accessible. They probably spent $200,000 in legal fees to fight this. And it confuses me to this day why they would even pick up this fight, unless there was some other hidden agenda going on or something. But anyway, for-profit companies are finding that they do have to follow these rules, or like kind of make their websites accessible. So there are more people in the United States accessing websites with assistive technology than live in all of Canada. It's not a small group, right? Like there's a lot of people. Some people say 20% of website visitors have some level or some sort of disability. So anyway, making your pages more accessible for people with disabilities makes them more accessible for everyone. This is the whole like the curb cut thing, right? Like there didn't always used to be little like the curb cuts at a corner at an intersection, but now that they're there, everybody uses them. Like it's not only easier for people in a wheelchair, it's easier for a mom pushing a stroller, or me with like, I don't want to, like, I have bad knees at this point in my life, so I don't want to have to step down the thing if I don't have to, right? Like that actually makes it more accessible for everybody when we do these things. Like a really concrete way, like to kind of talking about this too, is like you make it accessible with a keyboard. If you can get to everything with the keyboard, that helps your power users. So if you're a for-profit, like a SaaS company, and you're having to like try to argue for accessibility, I mean, that's a powerful argument. Like, you're not only helping people with disabilities, you're helping new users who may not kind of understand your website very well by structuring things well. And then you're helping your power users by letting them fly through your site with their keyboard, right? So lots of compelling reasons to do this. So a little bit more about this kind of, there's this matrix of sort of permanent disabilities, temporary, situational. This is, Microsoft actually has done a bunch of amazing work in this area, and I'm going to do a demo of one of their products in a minute. But they kind of go through, some of the different kind of modalities, and then permanent, temporary, and situational with different examples. So even like, we're talking about, like, Elise, your parents are deaf. Miles, your sign language. Like, there's the permanent disability of being deaf, but you could, in a temporary sense, you could have an ear infection and, for a few days not be able to hear as well. Or if you're a bartender in a noisy bar, I mean, that's not happening right now, but at some point we'll get back to being able to go to noisy bars. Like you can't hear as well. So, taking these things into account, when you think about it that way, it's not just, blind people and deaf people. It's like, it opens it up to, you kind of see like how many people actually have something that's keeping them from reading that tiny gray font on a white page that designers seem to like so much, right? So, yeah. So how do we go about this? So there are some simple best practices. This is not exhaustive in any sense, but if you do these things, you're off to a good start. So semantic HTML. Does everybody? I'll reverse that. Is anybody not familiar with that term, semantic HTML? It's not something you were born knowing, so it's totally okay not to know it. But is that something you've seen before? I mean, if you've been paying attention to accessibility, you might have, but
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think everybody's kind of good on that. Yeah, basically means, there are HTML tags that have meaning, and whenever you can, use those tags to, in the correct way, to assign meaning to your content. Whether it's an aside or an address or, header, main, footer, like all that stuff that kind of adds structure to the content. And that's going to allow screen readers to better understand your page. It's also going to help things like SEO, like Google's going to understand your page better, and it's going to be able to better kind of like bring you up in the rankings. So there's like lots of benefits to these things. Alt attributes on your image tags is just, it's table stakes. It's like you shouldn't even be letting the door of the poker joint if you don't do this, right? So that's kind of just a baseline. And we'll talk about tools in a minute. Use ARIA attributes if necessary, but like this quote says up here, and I think they actually said this during the Women of React conference too. The best ARIA is no ARIA at all. Like, you use semantic HTML everywhere you can, and if you find yourself that you're still in a situation where there's no appropriate tag, or the semantics aren't expressive enough, then you can layer on just the minimum ARIA that you need to get the meaning across. But really, a semantic HTML hopefully gets you most of the way there, and you only use that where you have to. Make sure everything's reachable by keyboard. We talked about that. Ensuring content and tab ordering makes sense. So I feel like this was a little more of a problem back when we all used floats to do layout, because it would reverse things. You'd have things in a certain order in the HTML, and by using floats, like on the page, it actually kind of flipped things around. So but it's still important. Especially tab ordering, you can very easily kind of mess that up. And like in a complex form, it needs to, as you tab through things, it needs to kind of make sense both to a sighted user and to someone who is having it read to them. Color contrast, I kind of made a flippant remark about that with like the gray text on a light background. That's an easy one to test with software. And then don't use only color to signify state. So there are people who are colorblind or to different degrees and different types of color blindness. So you know, if you have a button that, you know, or I guess maybe a button that is, you know, soon, kind of soon, or not soon, right? Don't use only color to denote that state. Like you want to have labels on it or some kind of icon that that also kind of gets that meaning across. All right. So the other part of how is like, how do we actually kind of test whether our stuff is accessible? So there are automated tools, and they're a really good start. So there's Axe and there's other ones. There's Lighthouse, which has Axe kind of built into it. It's a good start. It only finds something like 30% of the issues. So software can detect when color contrast isn't good. It can detect when there's, you know, alt attribute on an image tag. But say you have an alt attribute and there's text in there, there's no software yet that can tell you whether that accurately describes the image, right? So there's only so far that software will take you. I'm going to go through Accessibility Insights in a second. It's an amazing Chrome extension, and it's really, really good for doing sort of guided audits where it walks you through all the concerns. If you go through all of the Accessibility Insights, kind of the long form of that, and you know, kind of try to address everything, you're going to end up in pretty good shape. But there's no substitute for having an audit done by accessibility testers who are actually use assistive technology every day. So I think there's multiple companies at this point that do this, but Fable Tech Lab is one that I've worked with, and they have a community of, you know, dozens of people who use screen readers and magnifiers and braille readers and all these kinds of things. There's a guy there, Sam, who uses screen readers. He's blind. He did audits of a couple pages for us at Zapier, and it just blew our minds. I mean, first of all, we were on a call like this, and he was sharing his screen and going through and using his screen reader, and it's so fast. He has the stuff, he's reading at about, I don't know, 200 words a minute or something. You know, he'll hear the first like fragment of a word, and he's like, no, that's not it, and he'll move on. Where I'm like, what did that say? You know, I have like no idea. So it's really impressive, but it also just kind of, he would get to a certain point and be like, he's like, I don't know what's supposed to happen here. And we'd be like, oh, there's a little arrow, and you click it and the thing opens up, and it's like I can't even get to it. Like there's no, I can't tab to it. I can't space to it. There's no way for me to actually get that to focus. You know, it's like, oh crap, you know, so like back to the drawing board. And we actually ended up using a semantic HTML element instead of trying to build our own little widget for that, right? So, you know, I mean, they do cost money. So, you know, but if you're working at a company and they really want to do accessibility right, the way to do it is to either have people in-house or contract with a company like Fable to do audits. Okay, that's a bunch of information. How much of that was stuff that you already knew? How much of that stuff was kind of new to you, or more nuance or more detail?
I want to hear more about this accessibility testing job. Like, that's a thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could put you in touch with Abid, their chief operations officer, if you want to talk to them about maybe working for them. I mean, they're amazing. They're a small startup. They're maybe like a year and a half old or something. They haven't been around for a super long time. They're super nice.
Dude, that sounds perfect.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's totally a thing. Yeah, check them out. So yeah, remind me in Slack, and I'll do an intro email for you.
Will do.
Cool.
The situational thing, situational disability, is kind of interesting because it's like at that point you've got like how quickly can somebody learn how to use that? So like figuring out how to make it easy to learn too. Is important, I'm assuming. They're easy to find, easy to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a temporary or situational situation, like you may not, I mean, I don't know, you may not even use assistive technology. You may just wait and do it later, you know, or something. But I could see, you know, like you're starting to develop cataracts. Maybe like, I guess at this point I need to figure out how to get the thing to read the stuff to me.
Mm-hmm.
So even that process, you know, like say you're you know, if you're older and stuff and you're like not as comfortable with computers, maybe like that's going to be a harder process to learn it at that point than maybe earlier in your life too. So I don't know. I mean, it's all, you know, it's all a little complicated. Humans are messy anyway. So
when you have a baby, like you're sort of you're situationally disabled because often you have one handful and you learn to navigate the keyboard with your other hand. Like that's an example of that kind of situational.
And kids are distracting too, right? So it's almost like also like a cognitive impairment is because your attention is split all the time too, right? So cool. All right. So I'm going to demo. I'm going to demo from my own version of the shopping list app. So up here, this little blue heart with the magnifying glass on it is Accessibility Insights. This is a Chrome extension that Microsoft has put together. And it's really amazing. It's really good. So they have this kind of fast pass thing, which it's what I'm going to do in a second. The assessment, which is that kind of long form, you go through a bunch of steps and you can kind of toggle things on and off and see, you'll see it'll highlight stuff on the screen. And then the ad hoc tools are just like you can kind of pick and choose from the other tools that are included here. But if you took even a fairly like a medium complexity site and you did the full assessment and you followed all the links and you read all the stuff, by the end you'd be really like well versed in accessibility. I'm not gonna say you'd be an expert, but you would know so much more. So it's almost like a learning tool at the same time. So it's a really fantastic one.
Andrew, I'm going to interrupt you super fast. Steve is waiting at the door to get in. He got mixed up with the time.
Okay, yeah.
Move, I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you for that. Yeah. All right. Happy Steve? There's Steve. Hey, Steve.
Hey, sorry for being late.
Whatever, slacker. Just kidding.
Yeah. We just moved to Palm Springs, and I was like, oh, the meeting's at 5. And then I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, no. All good. No problem. So we're just going through accessibility, and I was about to demo Accessibility Insights on my own version of the shopping list app. So let's see how I did. All right. So I click this. Wait a second. Okay, it's not letting me click when I'm screen sharing. Okay, there we go. All right, so let me just rearrange my windows a little bit. Back and forth through the things. Zoom has the most clunky screen sharing interface. Okay, try to pull this out a little bit so I can, there we go. Okay, I can flip back and forth. Okay. Okay, so this is just the front page of it, and you'll notice there are 2 issues that it raised. The first one is color contrast. So I click on it, it highlights just that one issue on the page, and it's color contrast, ensure the contrast between foreground and background colors meets the WCAG. So that's the World Wide Web Consortium Accessibility Group, I think is what that stands for, contrast ratio thresholds. And the problem here is this, you can also join text. If you see that, it's light gray on a white background, like I was making fun of earlier. So that's probably something I should fix. Now, let's look at the other one. So link name, ensure links have discernible text. So it looks like there's text there, right? And it's,
is that a linked image?
It's a background image even, so there's not even alt text. It's actually literally just, here's the code. It's A class equals header link, href, no text, close A. Oof, that was not my best moment there. So ways that I could fix that. Well, actually, let me ask y'all, not Lauren, not Steve, not Jason, but let me ask the rest of you, what are some ways that I could fix that?
Do the trans off.
Any ideas?
My question is, if there's no, does it go anywhere? Does it do anything?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It is actually functional. It's a good question.
And so what's rendering the text?
That's actually an image,
Okay.
but it's a background image on the element. Miles, Elise, any ideas for how I could make this more accessible?
I don't have any ideas. I just now have a question because you keep saying it's a background image. Like it's a background image. So my whole thing is, can you put an alt text on a background image? Because technically you're still going to see it. Like the person still has to see it.
Yeah, you can't put background text on that. Let me see if I can find it in here. So it's this guy right here. Yeah, it's just an empty A tag. I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest.
That's interesting. I'm not entirely sure what would be a better method, because you still want it to be clickable, right? Because it does go somewhere.
Yeah. So there, I mean, I can think of a couple things I could do. So one thing I could do, I could put an ARIA label on this, right? I'm not sure what the ARIA is. It ARIA label would be. Is that the right one? Or ARIA role maybe? Label probably.
I think ARIA label.
Yeah.
Label.
Okay, so I could put that and put the text in there. The other thing I could do is actually put text in the A tag. You know, just use the semantics of it, and then do something to hide the text, right? So the old trick that we used to do back in the day was text indent -9999px. So it takes the text flies off the screen, and it leaves whatever was there. And that works, although I did read that Google started to penalize sites for doing that. But in any case, I just want there to be some text there so either the ARIA label or the text in the tag. So you know, that's something I should probably do. So I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to try to go back in here. Why can't I click on things when I have screen sharing? All right, there we go. I'm going to create a shopping list. So now we're in here. Let's, I think how do we do this? Start over. Oops. And okay, we just have the same issue here with the link name. Okay, there we go. So I'll try, here's my add an item screen. Let's have it run over that. What do we got here? We got color contrast. Whoops. The Zoom screen share really makes it so you can't click on stuff. Okay, so, that's for this white text on a brown button. So I guess that's not quite sufficient color contrast. I also don't have a label on my form element. So, all right. And then link name. So that's the same one from before. Okay, so let's add something here. Item added successfully. Go back to the list. All right, so now we have fluffernutter in there. Oh, more problems. Okay, so we still have the problem with the link. Oh, come on, Zoom. Click on stuff. Okay, we still have that problem. We know about that. I also don't have a label on my filter, so yeah, so that's not great. And then this button name, ensure buttons have discernible text. So I have this item. It's got a button. There's no text in the button. I don't know what I was thinking when I built this app. Like breaking all the rules. But anyway, I guess that hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of how the tool works. It really is fantastic. If you're on a desktop, so I have this in kind of device mode. If it's in more of like a desktop mode, you can run this tab stops thing on it. So So show tab stop. So I just start hitting tab and hopefully it starts showing if I tab through how the order that things are gonna be in focus, which I find like really amazing. So it's super helpful. So yeah, so any questions about accessibility insights? You can get it on the Chrome store. I'm actually in Microsoft Edge and it, no, I'm actually in Chrome, sorry. But it works in Microsoft Edge as well and in Chrome. It is a Microsoft product after all, so it makes sense that it works in Edge.
I was gonna say, what's kind of interesting is like, it kind of points out things you probably wouldn't think are not as accessible, like the white text on top of the brown button. What kind of sparks an interest for me is like new morphism is being like, it's being talked about a lot. And I kind of wonder how that would do in this, with this widget. But since it's a lot of like same colored features on top of each other, I don't know if everyone knows what new morphism is, but
I know what skeuomorphism is, but I don't know what this one is.
It's like the super cool like button looking. Let me just tags. I'll just put it in the chat and then.
Okay.
Isn't it kind of like flat design but with more depth?
Yeah. And it's like a lot of the same colors, but with the depth, I guess, kind of makes the button stand out.
All right. Should yeah, we could run it on their site, see how it goes. But yeah, I see what you're saying. So like, yeah, that's kind of yeah, it really depends like whether they're, if they're going with this gray text, like on these, I think those buttons are supposed to be sort of grayed out or something, but they're going to be really tough for someone who has low vision or something to be able to read.
Right, that's been a massive point to the new morphism that I've seen. There's a lot of people saying like it's not good for accessibility at all. I mean, it looks cool, but
yeah. Huh. Nice. Thanks for sharing that. That's pretty cool. I hadn't heard of that one before. All right. So that's the demo. I'll share the slides in the Slack channel. There's some resources here, including, it is better to do automated testing than to not do it. So Axe and Jest Axe. So Jest is a testing framework that's bundled with React, and there's a way to kind of hook that up to Axe pretty easily. So yeah. So anyways, that's that. Any other questions about it or anything?
I'm just curious to know how that text background contrast is gauged, like how they figure out like what the right balance is. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody knows the specific algorithm or anything, but it's they're able to calculate it based on the relative values somehow.
There's a bunch of calculators extensions that have the source available where you can see how they do it in JavaScript or in other tools. And as for like how they reach those values themselves for like AA and AAA compliance, it was based on I forget this, but it was based on like a number of studies, and they used kind of like banking forms and like paper first, and then also used like, well, how does that compare and contrast to like digital? So like if you've noticed, in addition to like color contrast, font sizes have been the thing, and now everyone's pretty much using 16 to 18 as a readable. They were some of the guidelines have been adopting hey, this worked in a paper format, but now we're in digital. How does that need to tweak? And that's how it kind of increased over time. And I know it also has some math to do with like number of available colors. Because like on the 256 screen, the contrast ratio was much easier to devise. So you had ironically, a wider range of colors or pairings. And then now it's like, well, a few million of these don't really do it.
Right. Cool. Oh wow, we're over time already. The pairings for this coming week, Sarah and Elise are together. Miles and Scott are together. And anybody have the board handy? Want to look up what we're working on?
Yeah, I've got it. If you want to
Okay.
see. Are you? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So let's see. So this week we have 11 and 12. So as a user, I want to delete items from my shopping list in cases where I made an error entering the item or where I know I will no longer be buying the item in the future. So this is an issue about deleting an item from your shopping list. It's going to be interacting a little bit more with the database side of things, although there's quite a bit of UI work too, because you will build maybe a modal on the front end. And then issue 12 is, as a user, I want to view a list of my shopping list items in order of how soon I'm likely to need to buy each of them again. So this is more about kind of sorting by time, like when you're planning on buying that item again. This is a super tricky one. Heads up, this is a tricky one. So anyone want to grab an issue in particular? Anything looks interesting to you? Otherwise,
At least I know you want to say something. I can see it.
Like, no, I mean, last time I picked first, so I feel like Scott and Miles should be granted that opportunity.
Oh, hell no. Okay, I'm gonna let Scott pick because I think last time I was paired with somebody. I was paired with Scott. I picked, so I'm gonna let him pick.
Right. What do you got, Scott?
I'm gonna have to flip a coin for myself.
Because if you let me pick, I'm gonna pick the hard one just because I know you can do it.
You know you can do it.
Scott, the hard one. You can do it. I have faith in you, Scott. So don't let me pick.
I guess 12.
Okay.
I feel like that works. You were pretty into the whole algorithm for all the calculating the dates and stuff. It's related to that.
It's a similar kind of issue, so that's cool. Okay.
Scott's good.
Myself.
The Time Lord Apprentice. He's been playing all things time.
That's what it seems like.
Here I am. Hi. What am I doing? Okay. I will figure out GitHub projects. Okay, and then Sarah and Elise will do the delete functionality. I will figure out the GitHub projects and get everybody assigned.
Or y'all can assign yourselves to these issues too. Yeah. And we should also make sure we kind of keep the board sort of tidy and like move things through the columns and all that stuff as we go. But okay, which mentor and mentors want to be on which issues?
Time board.
Hey Steve, how do you feel about calendars?
Man, I love calendars. Yeah, when I look at them.
I love working with time zones.
Already.
The time zone is the thing that's the best. This messed me up because this meeting has been 8 a.m. on Monday for me for this entire time.
Right.
We'll give you a reprieve because you've been in different time zones like pretty much every week. So I'll hop on 12.
Cool. Lauren, do you want to jump in with Jason on that one, just for the at least for get people oriented?
Yeah.
Let's see. So what are my groups again? I'm gonna put y'all in breakout rooms. So let's see. Jason, Lauren, I lost track of which of our team are on which one. Who's in there with you? Oh, Scott. Scott and Miles.
and Miles. Yep.
Right. Okay.
Bye, Elise.
And then, all right. So Elise and Steve, the two of you get to chat, and I'll be here for if you have any questions. So let me know. But I think y'all got this. So I'll awkwardly say goodbye to you as you pass back through the room. Right? Jason, join your breakout room.
My bad. I got distracted.